I'm Lynette Eastmond. I'm the leader of the United Progressive Party. And what we want to do today is to discuss with you some of the issues that have arisen from the budgetary proposals presented by the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs on May 30th, 2017. Now, one of the first issues that we wish to address is the expenditure, which everyone in Barbados knows that we have a debt problem and a fiscal deficit problem. And one of the areas that we need to address is cutting expenditure. Now, usually in Barbados, whenever there's a crisis, immediately we think about getting rid of those at the bottom. Our proposal is that at this point in time in our existence, especially with the use of technology, that the truth is there's no need to have a parliament of 30 people. Our recommendation is that the parliament should be reduced, and we're recommending a figure of reducing it from 30 seats to 25. We believe that this would save government some money. We're also prepared to have discussions where we could talk about whether we could reduce it further. Now, at the moment in the estimates, a sum of $10 million is allocated to Parliament. There are some people who may raise the issue as to whether or not with this cut in the constituencies that there may be a problem with the delivery of services. Our view is that really what we should do is to upgrade the departments in government so that they're better able to deliver those services. With respect to the community, we believe that the government should focus on upgrading community organizations and also non-governmental organizations within Barbados. We believe that this would help to address the issue of the disconnect between Barbadians and leadership and decision making. We think that that is critical. Certainly in terms of our proposal, having canvassed a number of individuals in Barbados, the response has been that the increasing the number of seats in Barbados has done nothing to improve their well-being. It has not resulted in better representation, and it has not resulted in the more efficient delivery of services. So we believe that Barbadians would agree with us for the reduction in the number of seats in Barbados. The other issue that we would like to address has to do with corruption. We believe that corruption costs Barbados significantly. It costs because if anyone has to pay a bribe in order to get a contract, it means that the cost of the bribe goes in to whatever the contract price is. What that means is that Barbadians pay for it. It means that the cost of goods and services going into government possibly would be increased. So we believe that we have to take a serious approach to this. Now, the leader of the opposition spoke about this, and I know that the Democratic Labour Party had this as part of its platform in 2008. But with these two parties on either side of the aisle in Parliament, little has been done to address the issue of corruption. We believe that the legislation that has already been debated, that we need to review that to increase its effectiveness. The other thing that we need to do is to ensure that there's greater transparency. Whenever contracts are going to be given, they should be available on a website. We also believe that the individuals who receive these contracts, that their company names should be available to the public as well. And therefore, that is why we're in favor of a Freedom of Information Act in Barbados. The other thing has to do with the Public Accounts Committee. For many years now, Barbadians have been looking at the Public Accounts Committee. They've been looking at the reports of the Auditor General. And even though there are several questions which are raised about taxpayer funds, there's very little that has been done about it. We think that piece of legislation needs to be amended in order to ensure that if there is a prima facie case that a person may be guilty of an offense, that that person, just like any other person in Barbados, would face the law courts, and if they're found guilty, well, then the appropriate penalty would be put in place by the judicial officer. We do think that corruption needs to be taken seriously, and really it should not just be an issue that is raised at election time, and then when these individuals get into Parliament, they don't do anything about it. The other issue that we would like to raise has to do with taxation. the National Social Responsibility Levy was raised from 2% to 10%. But this piece of legislation has been fraught with difficulties from the very beginning, and up to now they haven't been addressed. Now, the Social Responsibility Levy was implemented through the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act. It is our view that the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act is not an appropriate piece of legislation for implementing new types of taxes. We believe that perhaps it can be used for increasing or decreasing rates of taxes, but not for implementing new taxes. This was not the intention of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act, and we believe, in fact, that it may be unconstitutional to levy taxes from individuals without an appropriate piece of legislation in place. This is unfortunate. We believe that going forward, there's really no need, if you're going to put a new piece of legislation in place or if you're going to put a new tax in place, for it to be done in this fashion. New taxes usually are put in place by the Minister of Finance, making a proposal, discussing it with interested parties, running scenarios as to how it would be implemented, and then implementing it in a smooth fashion. This is totally inappropriate, and it has caused chaos in the past and continues to cause chaos even now. Then you have the impact which this tax will have. We believe that it will continue to slow down growth in the economy, so that the taxes which the minister thinks that he will be able to collect, he will not be able to do so, because there are a number of individuals, large businesses and small businesses, that will suffer, and that the collection which he hopes for will not occur. Unfortunately, the Minister of Finance has taken the position that really he is the chief tax collector in Barbados, as opposed to acting as the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs. There's a reason why civil servants collect taxes and ministers set policy. And right now, the minister is not thinking like a person who sets policy, because what these initiatives will do will actually push people underground, and eventually Barbados will collect even less taxes than it does at the moment. The other initiative that came from the Minister of Finance has to do with the fact that he's of the view that it is necessary to run after individuals who in villages in Barbados bake sweetbread and sell it, or make sugar cakes, or to run after a snow cone vendor. This doesn't make any sense. It isn't that tax officials in Barbados did not know that these people were running small businesses. They have known this. But all around the world, where tax policy is concerned, it makes no sense whatsoever to use your human resources, use up your money to run after individuals who, after you manage to track them down and you calculate their assessable income, give them their deductions and give them their allowances, there will be very little taxable income to tax in any case. So then when you do that, you increase your costs within the Barbados Revenue Authority, and you will gain very little from it. So, I mean, this is basic tax policy, but the Minister of Finance is not meant to be a tax collector. He is meant to be a person who implements policy. So essentially, these individuals who really run subsistence businesses to help their families so that they don't have to rely on these social services, on welfare, the minister now is going to put these people at risk, and that makes no sense whatsoever. The 2% which he plans now to impose on foreign exchange, that is another problem. It's another way of raising revenue, and I will talk about the international business sector a little later. But this particular proposal is going to affect them as well. And as we know, that sector at the moment is rather fragile, and we fear for what is going to happen when this 2% is implemented. The international business sector in Barbados has been neglected for many years. In fact, I was surprised that the Minister of Finance noted that over the last 7 years, Barbados has lost $1.4 billion in revenue because of the impact which Canadian legislation has had on the sector. Now, this sector falls within the portfolio of the Minister responsible for international business, who is Donville Innes. Now, the response that we've had from government is that there's nothing they can do about it. So that part of the international business goes, and you simply say there's nothing you can do. But this isn't how governments in other countries behave. If we look, for example, at Finland, and Finland might seem very far away to you, but as far as the United Progressive Party is concerned, Barbados has to compare itself with other developed countries because that is where we want to be. Now, Finland itself lost a huge company, Nokia. Now, Nokia used to provide the world with 40% of its mobile phones. And then that company ran into problems because you had other companies which came on board, like Samsung. And basically, because the market was so competitive, they lost market share. They used to provide, for example, a quarter of the GDP of Finland. Now, what did Finland do? Finland did not sit there and say that they could do nothing. The Finnish government started to look at other things that they could do to earn income and to employ their people. In fact, they even went back to looking at planting timber and doing logging and things like that, traditional areas. But they also went into the new technology areas. They went into the development of gaming, other applications, software development. And for example, there's this game called Angry Birds that many people know about, which came out of Finland, and that came out of Finland through the crisis. Because many countries recognize that when there is a loss, there also is an opportunity. But the government has to get up and say that we have to do something about this, bring the private sector on board, and make the changes necessary. It really is not good enough to just sit there and say that there's nothing you can do, because there's always something you can do. The one thing that Barbados has done consistently is that it has negotiated double taxation agreements. And I would say that one of the things that came out of the OECD crisis, which between the ministry that I was involved in at the time as Director of International Business and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we sat down and said, well, if the OECD is so concerned about Barbados, why don't we try to negotiate treaties with all of them? And that is what we set about doing. We revised the model treaty. We discussed it with various entities, made sure that it was OECD compliant in some instances for OECD countries. And then we went about through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, writing every single country to ensure that we could have double taxation agreements with each one of them, because they said that that was what they wanted. And that was one of the positive things that came out of the OECD initiative, when initially it was seen as an attack. So I use that to say that the Barbados government really, in these instances where it looks as though it is a negative, we have to use the opportunity to our advantage. Now, in terms of the shift which Barbados can engage in, we want to talk about the new economy. Now, bear in mind, as far as the United Progressive Party is concerned, every single Barbadian should be able to have a high standard of living. And let me say what that means, because a lot of people try to remind us that the poor will always be with us. And yes, there might be people who are poor in Canada, and there might be people who are poor in Finland, but there are certain basic amenities that they have in their homes that every Barbadian should have. Every Barbadian should have a decent home, and they should have indoor plumbing. That's what every Barbadian should have. And we do not believe that it is beyond us. It is just that we have to take on the mindset that it is possible and allocate our resources appropriately. So the new economy now, Barbados as a small developing country has just never leveraged technology in the way that it should. Even though we've had these discussions for many years, but the truth is, technology has not been taken seriously, not really, neither in Barbados nor in the rest of the CARICOM. And because of this, it means that we were never able to take advantage in the way that countries like Hong Kong has been able to do, and countries like Malta. Now, the Minister of Finance, unfortunately, mentioned that Barbados shouldn't worry because we are number 4 on the Human Development Index, number 54 on the Human Development Index, I would have to remind the minister that in 2008, Barbados was around 37 on the Human Development Index. 37. 54 is a far drop from 37. And in case somebody is going to argue that the UN now is doing the Human Development Index differently, at that time, Malta was around 38. We were around 37. Now we are at 54. Malta is still around 37. So I don't think it has anything to do with how the UN is doing the Human Development Index. The truth is that Barbados has fallen. And I think the government, the Minister of Finance, and also the leader of the opposition has to recognize that now we are in a crisis position. So you see, when Barbadians look at the parliament and they see that those who are supposed to represent us feel that it is a place where you can engage in levity, where you can hurl insults at each other, and that we're supposed to find that amusing, we don't, because clearly Barbados continues to do worse and worse. And it is because also neither the opposition nor the government really is looking to do those fundamental things. Now let me talk a little bit about technology. Technology has the ability to be an enabling tool in order to make Barbados far more efficient than it is. I have personally had situations where I have called to developed countries in order to get, for example, a tax ID number, and it has taken 15 minutes. I have had situations where I have had to call abroad about a pension for a client, and it took 15 minutes to get the information. I have situations where I have had to call about whether there has been the probate of a will abroad, and it took 15 minutes on the phone. Why? Because the person that I was talking to, or the person who sent me the email, was sitting in front of a computer. They could simply pull up the information and give that information to me in 15 minutes. So Barbados is really lagging behind when for something as simple as that. Simply requesting information is going to take sometimes a matter of days, sometimes a matter of months, or sometimes a matter of years. You know, and we cannot continue like that. And part of the solution has to be in ensuring that we implement the technology that we need. So that is that part about technology as an enabler and as a facilitator. The other thing about technology is that we have a number of young people and even not so young people these days who we have trained in a number of sectors, but who we have not developed the economy for them to participate in. Now, what we think we need to do is that we need to get back out there and get some of those companies back into Barbados. They don't have to be the largest technology companies. They could be medium-sized technology companies which are interested in outsourcing some of their work and are prepared to set them up in Barbados. Now, in Barbados, we had Intel and we also had PRT. And because these companies left, some person probably thinks that it doesn't make any sense. That is not true. The people who worked in Intel, and some of them might be listening to me, have gone on to work in other companies to provide value added to those companies, and they've set up their own companies with the knowledge that they gained from working in Intel. So Intel was not a failure for Barbados. It was a very positive thing. And we need to get some of those companies back because we can use their networks that they have with companies in other countries. And we can also benefit from the technology transfer that would occur. So we need that. But we also need to facilitate our own startups in Barbados. There's no doubt in my mind that there are people in Barbados who are talented and that they can develop applications, they can develop gaming software, they can develop software for all types of businesses. And I want to say too that one of the things that Barbados has not done is that it has not modernized how it has dealt with our traditional industries like agriculture and manufacturing. And technology can do this too. It can make it more efficient for us to engage in those type of industries, which a lot of the young people are interested in. It is not true that young people are not interested in agriculture. They are interested, but they struggle because we are not providing the facilitating environment for them. Now, I also want to say that as far as technology is concerned, that we have a number of individuals in Barbados who are involved in music. They're also involved in film. We have a number of people in other aspects of the cultural industries. They're writing books. But how do they get their products sold? Now, I have for a long time believed that instead of one individual trying to sell a particular CD or film, that Barbados itself should be to provide that platform for all of our products and services. Because if we were to sell them together using the technology, promote them and sell them, it would be better for all of us. As I keep saying, Barbados is small. Barbados really only needs a little bit in order for us to do well. But somebody has to be determined enough. Somebody has to be passionate enough. Somebody has to be patient enough. The world as it is and the problems which Barbados has are not going to be solved by the biggest bully in the world. It doesn't work like that. The people who you have to negotiate with internationally, you're in no position to bully them. So the fact that we tend to feel that bullying is some special form of leadership in Barbados, all of that is misplaced. All of that needs to change. If Barbados is going to make this shift, it has to do these things. It has to leverage technology. That is what all the other countries have done, such as the Hong Kongs and the Singapores and Finland and all those countries that we're talking about. We have to do those things too. But it's going to take the person who is determined and patient enough to do it. So the other thing that I want to talk about has to do with our embassies abroad. And our embassies abroad have to be part of this initiative to sell our goods and services, because really Barbadians need to get up and go there. If you don't get up and meet people, you're not going to meet that PRT again. Now, we have several missions abroad, and when you look at the estimates of expenditure, there's $32 million which is allocated to our missions abroad. Our missions abroad are necessary, but I think if you're going to allocate $32 million to them, they have to be in a position to help us to generate some of that revenue that supports them. They have to provide the facilitating environment for our entrepreneurs in Barbados and business people who need to go abroad to sell our goods and services. So our missions abroad are very, very important. There are people I know that whenever you're talking about technology, they say, oh, but would you ever have enough to make a difference? The answer to that is yes. Everybody in Barbados must know about India and the outsourcing that has been done in India that has transformed sections of India. But it's not only India. If you look, for example, at Vancouver, Vancouver has developed simply providing post-production services for a number of film companies that are in the United States. I mean, there's always an argument about whether or not they're stealing business from the US, but the thing about it is that this has been an industry there for several years, and they've done very well on it. Atlanta is the same thing. It doesn't have to be film. It could be music. But certainly, Barbados can be a place. And, you know, we have this very beautiful environment that everybody would like to come to. So we need to utilize it not only for tourism, but also to attract businesses in Barbados. So yes, Barbados can be like Atlanta. It can be like Vancouver. It can be like Silicon Valley. If we would just put our minds in that position where we do these things. And I have to say too, before anybody thinks that you're just talking about jobs for UE graduates, there's no entity that establishes itself in Barbados that's only going to use technical people. Both skilled people and unskilled people, and there's going to be the spin-offs for accountants, lawyers, schools, doctors, university. If you can develop a situation here where using technology, which is a very clean industry, and which is an industry that lends itself well to a small country like Barbados. If we can focus on this, I think that this can turn around Barbados in very short order. I want to make one final point on divestment. The Minister of Finance spoke about the sale of the Hilton Hotel. And I want to say something about taxpayer assets. The assets in Barbados that are owned by the taxpayers of Barbados, or in which the taxpayers of Barbados have invested, really are assets that ordinary Barbadians have contributed to over centuries. And if we are going to sell them, the Minister of Finance really needs to communicate with the people of Barbados, because they belong to us, or we have a significant investment in them. It is really highly disrespectful to be selling Barbadian assets without, well, it's a level of arrogance that I find amazing, that you can sell assets that belong to the taxpayers or investments by taxpayers and not have any regard for the taxpayers of Barbados. So I hope that with the sale of the Hilton, all Barbadians will be able to know who are the individuals or the companies who put in bids for our investment, who will be the purchasers. And I also hope that this is not the first of many situations where the Minister of Finance will simply feel that he can sell off taxpayers' assets. There are people in Barbados, as I have said, who have contributed to the assets over centuries, and therefore they need to know. But there are some people in Barbados who have never accumulated any significant wealth. Those things they have a share in. And I think we have to be very careful when we think about selling off every single asset that we have. Some of them which are earning income. I don't think there's any need to do that. There are other options that you have in place. For example, the assets need not be run by the government. They can be run by a private sector entity. But as far as the asset is concerned and its ownership, there's a need for Barbadians to continue to own some of its own assets. Unfortunately, the presentation by the Minister of Finance did not address many of the issues in Barbados that would cause the shift that we need to have in Barbados. He did not. In terms of any economic policy, he essentially kicked the can down the road. Instead of saying what these new policies would be, he just said that there is a group, I guess a private sector group, that he plans to meet with, who apparently will advise him what his economic policy should be. I can only hope that those policies and that those discussions will take into account the ordinary people of Barbados, because at the end of the day, where poor people are concerned, all they have is their dignity, and I hope that that is taken into account. The other point that he made in his presentation was that there is supposed to be a 10% cut across the estimates of revenue and expenditure. We don't know what the 10% cut will be. So apparently this will be done in secret. And really, the purpose of the parliament is to allow parliamentarians to speak to constituents. And if this is going to be done in secret, it means then that the purpose of the parliament is being undermined. So the United Progressive Party will have more to say on this and other issues as we continue to roll out our candidates and as we continue to go into the constituencies in Barbados. We recognize that the budgetary proposals were both used, the budgetary proposals and the response to the budgetary proposals, of course, were used as a platform for campaigning for both sides. And this is unfortunate because really Barbados is at a juncture where it really needs to do something and to start doing it immediately. I believe that waiting until October is far too long. So I thank you for listening to me, and we will be back with you shortly with other candidates who will give you their perspective on some of these critical issues in Barbados. Thank you.